Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Relax Running Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for coming back. I'm Tyson, the head coach here at Relax Running. I'm here every single week sharing thoughts, ideas, interviews with runners and experts in and around the field of distance running with the goal of hopefully helping you improve your running performance. So it doesn't matter whether you've been a runner for 30 years and you've competed in 3 Olympics, or you're brand new to the sport of running, or you're a triathlete or someone in a running-based sport. I'm pretty confident that there's going to be plenty of knowledge, thoughts, advice for you throughout this podcast. So make sure you scroll through, have a look at some of the audio interviews or some of the videos that we've posted on YouTube. There's constantly new resources being put up there. Today, I've got a really specific one I wanted to focus on, and that is whether or not you receive any benefit from adhering to some form of a training plan. Now, it's a very specific conversation. It's a very specific topic. And part of the reason that I've been doing this is because earlier in the week, I had a new athlete, Emma, reach out to me, who I've just started coaching. We're about 3 days into the relationship now. And one thing I found interesting was Emma, she's been running now for 12 months. She just did her first marathon. She'd been guided up until now pretty much by online generic training programs, and she got a pretty good start. But one of the constant questions that people have when it comes to coaching or when it comes to improving running is, what should my next step be? Should I just coach myself? Should I use a generic training plan? Do I need a more strategic coaching relationship? So today, my hope is to help boil down that conversation a little bit for you and help you clarify exactly what it is that you need to do as a runner. Now, I can speak to this from firsthand experience, whether it's me as an athlete working with a coach or me as a coach working with an athlete. One of the big perks that comes with partnering up with someone, whether it's a mentor or a coach or a friend who knows more than you about the sport of running, is that when you've got a voice of reason who's not as emotionally connected to your own improvement as what you are, sometimes it's so much easier to see what a clear next step should be. Last year, if you've listened to a few of these podcasts, you would have heard me speaking about some of the trouble that I was having navigating the best way back with my own running after a number of little calf issues. It wasn't until I partnered up with a mentor who happened to be a physiotherapist, a massage therapist, and I saw him on quite a few occasions, that I was able to see a bit more of a clear path forward through that frustrating time. And as a result, he equipped me with so many incredible tools, and it saw me tie together almost 12 months of consistent training at quite high volume and at times intensity that I hadn't really been able to do for the 7 years before that. And so for me, just seeing that or having that experience made me realize that every now and then it's nice to handball the weight of your drama to someone else. I always see that as the role my coaches played, and specifically what I play or the role I play with the athletes I now coach is my goal is not just to put together a training program, give it to you and say, hey, let's chat next week. My goal is also to play sounding board or mentor. So it doesn't matter whether you're a 3 or 4 time Olympian or whether you're brand new to running. The idea of playing that sounding board is incredibly helpful. Being emotionally disconnected to the point that you often can see some practical solutions and ways through. One of the perks of having 25 years of experience in this sport is a lot of the time, things that seem like a really complex problem when it comes to structuring training, just through nature of being in and around it for so long, is quite simple for me in a lot of instances. It sounds cocky to say it, but it's like anyone who's been involved in anything for 25 years, often you'll see a clearer path towards where it is that you're trying to get to than what you may if you've only been involved for a few months. I experienced this as a stand-up comedian, which has been something I've been super committed to and passionate about for the last 6 years. I often go up to comedian veterans of 30 years plus, and at the end of the set, just have a debrief on, hey, what went well, what went poorly. And they'll often say, hey, what the heck was with your body language here? Or why did you deliver a point like that? Or why did you hold the microphone there? Or why were you hiding behind the stand? And things that, from their perspective, at least as a comedian who's 6 years into the scene, they look at a number of things I'm doing and go, come on, dude, like there's room for improvement there. And so it's that attitude that I try and bring to the coaching. But with all of that said, let's start with point number 1. Who needs a training plan or a coach? And what is the benefit of it? Well, these are 3 separate categories that I'll break down briefly before we launch into the rest of this particular podcast episode. I think one thing that is really important to note is depending on where you're at in your career is going to dictate exactly what it is that your next step could be. There is definitely space for a generic training plan for you. What is really important before you just go out and purchase a generic training plan is that you spend a little bit of time to clarify what it is you're actually trying to achieve. Are you trying to run a marathon? Are you trying to run a half, a 10, a 5, an ultra? Are you on the couch and just trying to run around the block? Often, it's so much easier to hit a destination when you know where it is that that destination is specifically. And this is where I think generic training programs can come in well, especially for two people. And it sounds sort of strange, the people I'm about to list, but in a way it makes sense. I would say if you're just dipping your toes into the world of running and you're thinking, all right, I'm pretty sure I'm interested. I at least would like to train for a 10K or a half. And you don't really know where you're at, but you've got a little bit of a guide as to what your mate ran, who you think you might be able to keep up with for a half marathon. That's where I would recommend you to just dip your feet in the water of a generic program. Have a look at something that gives you a general outline. Hey, what days you should run, why you should run on those days, what kind of training you should do based on the actual goal time that you've set for yourself. Having that as a bit of a stepping stone towards your first goal is a great place to start. First of all, gives you opportunity to figure out, hey, do you even enjoy the training? Do you like being out there running? Or is it something that you're just going to put up on the shelf and maybe now you can focus on something else? The beauty there and the way that I've structured the training plans on the Relaxed Running website is I've got certain levels. So if you're a brand new runner, for example, trying to run a marathon, our marathon training program, which is 18 weeks, aims at you running between a 4.5 and a 6 hour marathon. Now, through that, it gives you a bit of an idea of what training would look like, how the build up works. You don't have to guess your way through. One of the most overwhelming things I find with a subject that's relatively new to me, composting, for example. I won't bore you with the details, but I realized recently I wanted to get involved in doing some composting. I went to Google and there's 723 different ways to compost apparently, and I just wanted something which was clearly laid out for me. And so in the end, an answer was I just downloaded a cheap, easy way to develop a compost. I thought, all right, I'm going to eliminate all the guesswork and just focus on that. The other people who often benefit from a generic training program is someone who may have been involved in the sport for a long time that doesn't specifically want to work with a coach, but also isn't 100% confident with the way to structure their training towards their next goal time. So for example, say you're a 3 hour and 10 minute marathon runner and you're aiming to run 2 hours and 48 minutes. Well, the way that I've structured the training programs gives you the opportunity to go from, all right, well, I'm a 3 hour runner, let's get below 250. And you can follow that process like that. It's still a stepping stone. The area that I think it does fall short in, which is okay for some people, is despite the fact that usually these generic training programs are so much cheaper than working with a personal coach, it doesn't allow a lot of wiggle room when it comes to adapting for life stresses, illness, injury, work commitments, insert whatever it may be in your life. And as a result, sometimes that guesswork creeps back in. For example, if you have to miss a week of important training based on the fact you are sick, it doesn't adjust the training program accordingly. So I would say if you're an athlete who lacks confidence in your ability to actually know what to do and when, that's when I would say, hey, let's not focus on a generic training plan. Let's take a practical step towards working one-on-one in some capacity with someone more qualified in the sport of distance running. That's a really good way to lay it out, I think. I think there are a couple of really practical tips. The other thing that I would recommend is make sure that you're getting the program, whether it's generic or customized, from someone that you trust. Don't just go to some random website that you've never gone to before, because sometimes too generic, too broad can be too stressful. So there might be a generic, hey, this is your 18-week marathon plan. Is that an 18-week marathon plan for a 6-hour runner, a 3-hour runner, a 50-year-old, a 20-year-old? Go to something which is laid out clearly, offers a clear path forward, ideally with someone who's either been in the sport for longer than you, someone who runs faster than you, or someone that you trust. Now, this serves as a roadmap. I think, and this is the second point I want to talk about, I think the beauty of actually taking some time to clarify your training plan, whether it's generic or with a coach, is that it actually forces you to make that decision about what it is that you're training for. I noticed in my day-to-day life, it's funny because I literally spent this morning navigating this because it's like a constant area of interest, but also of frustration. I'm trying to figure out what I need to do at what parts of my day between exercise and kids and comedy and trying to be a good family man and also having work commitments. I'm like, oh my gosh, my head can often just feel so overwhelmed. So this morning I sat down and just planned out my week on it's like a personal assistant AI tool. I can't remember. Reclaim AI is what I'm trialing. And the beauty with that was it actually forced me to clarify what my priorities are. Like, what did I want to eliminate? What do I want to automate? And what do I want to delegate? But it's not until you take that step towards going, all right, these are the most important things that you can actually start building a training week. The same is true for you. The beauty of saying, I'm going to commit to this 18-week training plan for a marathon is that it immediately sets you a deadline, it clarifies your goal, and it makes it easier for you to say no to all of the other shiny objects in and around the world of distance running that may otherwise steal your attention away from the goal that you've now chosen. I've actually got a tattoo under my arm which sort of is symbolic of this, a ship. It says homeward bound. The idea with homeward bound is I like the idea of a ship going through a rough ocean. When you're homeward bound, when you know where it is that the destination you're trying to get to is, it makes it so much easier to sort of navigate your way through the waves and the storm of what life or running can sometimes throw at you. So if you want to eliminate all that mental, emotional stress that comes with choosing the best way for you to train, get yourself a plan and start taking the daily steps towards improving it. The other thing that I touched on briefly around eliminating guesswork and customization is that I think when it comes to anything, particularly in the world of running, accountability is very important. In fact, I think one of the most common bits of advice that I'll give to someone who's really trying to work on their ability to be consistent with their running is I stole it from Tony Robbins. I can't claim it as my own. But Tony Robbins said, you need to create leverage. You need to create accountability. As a coach or as having someone where there's a little bit of weight attached to you doing the work or not doing the work, I think it forces you to show up more consistently. Now, the example that Tony Robbins gives, which is quite dramatic, but depending on how serious you are about getting started or taking practical steps towards improving your own running performance, it might be something for you. A coach serves as an accountability partner. So that might be a weekly phone call where it says, hey, how did you go? We set 3 runs. Did you do them? You say, oh, I did 1. The coach says, well, that's not part of the plan. If you don't have a coach, it might be a friend that you've chosen to throw some of the leverage to. Give them $1,000 and say, if I don't train as I'm supposed to train, withholding illness, injury, whatever else, you don't give that $1,000 back to me. A lot of the time, $1,000 is enough of a leverage point for people to make sure that they actually commit to doing the training that they've committed to doing. So if you struggle with forming the habit of running, if you can't get out there consistently, you're not enjoying it, you could do with some leverage. I think that's something where a coach over a generic plan, or at least a leverage partner, an accountability partner, could be very beneficial to you. Now, one of the things that a lot of new athletes especially struggle with is knowing how to adapt the training in the latter stages of a training plan, or how, I think more specifically, how to structure each period of the year. Now, why a generic training plan is really good in an 18-week or 15-week or 10-week or whatever it may be, build up towards your goal race, it kind of stops there. It doesn't offer you a whole heap of clarity around how to build your year effectively. Now, the reason this is important is because the idea of just being on and training at an absolute maximum level for the entire year is a recipe for fatigue. It's a recipe for not enjoying it. It's a recipe for injury. You want to know where specifically you are in your training year. So before you choose a generic plan or a running coach, this is something you should consider. You don't just want to go from one training plan to another training plan to another training plan, because often, even though the actual build-up or the phasing within that training plan might account for different distances, recovery days, etc., it doesn't actually say where you're at in the year. So one thing, and I'm currently in this season right now, one thing that I'm focused on over the next couple of months, because I'm in my off season, which means I'm not racing, I'm just getting fit and strong for my next racing season is I'm in the gym lifting heavier weights than what I would otherwise be doing. I'm also injecting a little more speed work into my training plan than what I would generally do in a marathon build-up. Obviously, as I get closer to marathon race day, the training starts to look a lot more specific to marathon running. So, and the idea of throwing like really intense, high effort or high power workouts into my training week when I'm doing 100 kilometers a week or thereabouts, it's just too much stress on your body. And so this is the perfect place to do it. The flip side of that is also true. You'd be crazy in that really peak stage of your training to start doing huge volumes of weights, huge power exercises, high intensity efforts, because a lot of the time that combination of high intensity and really high mileage is just a little bit too much for you to handle. So that is something that I would really encourage you to consider as well before taking the step towards going, all right, do I need a coach or do I need a training plan? Honestly, I find that when I have this 12-month structure, and mine is broken up into off-season, build-up, race season, and off-season. Do you know what I mean? So I know where I'm at. I know how much focus I can be, or how much focus each stage requires. The beauty with where I'm at right now is emotionally, you get to distance yourself from the training a bit. I'm not paying as much attention to the watch during workouts. It's more just getting it done, getting out in the sun, enjoying it, getting some fresh air, giving my wife and kids a little break from me, giving me a little break from them. So don't stress, she doesn't watch the podcast. I'm nervous now. She's in the kitchen. She's going to be able to hear me doing this. I'll apologize when it's finished. That was a random tangent. I have to edit that part out in case she listens. But the truth is, there's some real perks with this phase of training as well. The last thing that I think is really important is just the resource factor. Now, one thing, and you'd be exactly the same in whatever industry that you work in. If you've been in that industry for quite a long period of time, naturally, you're going to have so many incredible connections. And if I came to you and you're in finance and I said, hey, have you got any really good budgeting tools? You'd be like, Tyson, I've got 16. This one's for this one's for that. And I'd go, thank you so much. I know nothing about finance. I know nothing about budgeting. Like this is really, really helpful to me. Especially through doing this podcast over the last 4.5 years, I think it is, or 250 episodes. I think it's nearly 5 years. I've built some incredible friendships and I've got some incredible connections that I often send my athletes to, whether it's a nutritionist, whether it's a physio, whether it's a podiatrist, whether it's a spinal or strength coach. It really doesn't matter. I think one of the perks of getting yourself involved in someone over a generic plan is that it might give you access to a whole world of resources that is really targeted and aimed and built around helping you improve your running performance. And so before you decide that you're just going to go generic, consider what benefits you may get, or if you need any of those benefits through working with someone that you trust. I know that it's always a compliment to me when someone comes to me because I've been recommended, and I know the athletes, or sorry, more specifically the coaches, physios, podiatrists, those people I just mentioned, whenever I send someone to them, it's a compliment because they're like, oh, okay, Tyson reckons I'm good. Yeah, obviously, not that they need my approval. Usually it's like their PhDs and the fact they've worked on Olympic teams is enough evidence that they're actually doing something well. But it's nice. It's a build-up for them. It's helpful to you. And obviously, when all of our focus is built around helping you improve your running, it's just a really cool resource for you to have. I mean, the truth is there's so many different facets, depending on which way you want to look at it, that can be incredibly beneficial for each of these things. But I just want to offer a little bit of food for thought, because a lot of the times new athletes will contact me just for some general guidance and say, hey, Tyson, I'm so overwhelmed. This is what Google said. What do I do? And I'll say, hey, well, here's 25 questions. If you answer these questions, it's going to give me a whole heap more clarity to be able to direct you, guide you, help you find what it is that you're looking for. And so with that said, guys, do not be overwhelmed. There's some really practical, helpful guidance out there available. Sometimes it's just asking the question. Now, this is nothing against you guys, because I'm exactly the same. Whenever I listen to a podcast, I very, very rarely reach out to them. I mean, there's some podcasts I've been listening to for years and I've never sent an email, despite the fact that I know if that person got my email, they'd be able to help answer that question far more effectively. So if you are in a situation where you're like, Tyson, I really have no idea what to do, shoot me an email. Jump on relaxrunning.com, hit the contact button. That will come through to my email address and I'll help point you in the right direction, whether that's towards a training program, or whether that's just some general advice. I'm happy to help out there. So do that. All right, jump onto relaxrunning.com and hit that contact button. Guys, thanks for listening. As always, really appreciate the support. I love hearing from you guys. I love hearing about which episode you enjoy. So feel free to guide the ship. I want to create this to be a podcast that you enjoy more and more, and it's even more practical for you each week. So if you've got any guidance, I'm always open to hearing it. Would also love your ratings, reviews, and comments wherever it is that you listen to the podcast. That'd be super helpful. In the meantime, guys, happy training, and I'll speak to you all again next week.